What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. This is a bit of an impromptu video. This is one that I did not plan to make. However, with considering the circumstances, it was just too good not to make. I'm going to be weighing in here on this this Robo-Calls scandal that's going on in Canadian politics right now, but I thought before I get into this, because I am going to get political in this video, and I get very fired up when I start talking politics, I need to tell you a little bit about who I am for those of you that don't know, the things that I believe in. As far as religion goes, I'm an agnostic theist, and what that means is it doesn't mean, first of all, it doesn't mean that I don't believe in God. I do believe that there is something. However, I don't know what that is, because A, I've never experienced it, and B, I'm not convinced that any major religion has it right. But I do believe that there is something that we're probably not meant to know until it's our time. That's the way that I look at things as far as religion goes. I believe that there is some kind of a higher power, but I don't know. I'm humble enough to say that I don't know what it is. When it comes to my political beliefs, technically I classify as an anarchist communist. And basically what that means is, I think things like capitalism is for big dumb smellies. I don't believe necessarily in things like the state or things like private property to most degrees. I think that we would be much better off as a people, mainly if we abolished capitalism. But abolishing things like the state and private property and things like that, I also think could be good things if done right. Now, saying that, you'll probably notice I'm wearing my one of my many, actually, Canada sweaters, and I'm drinking my Tim Hortons. Because, believe it or not, I'm actually an anarchist communist who loves this country. And that might make no sense. And I respect that, and we can talk about that at a different time. But I do love my country, and I do love a lot of people that live in this country. Because the country to me is not about... the country to me is more of an abstract idea, rather than a geopolitical boundary and boundaries within those boundaries and boundaries within those boundaries within those boundaries. That's not a country to me. A country to me is an idea. And I love the idea of this country, of Canada, and I will always love that. So, when I hear about something like this Robo-Calls stuff that's going on, you know, it really fires me up. It really does. But let's talk a little bit about exactly what this is if you don't know. The Robo-Calls scandal has just broken recently, and the scandal involves as many as a few 100,000 automated phone calls that went out from a call center in Edmonton, based in Edmonton, to, this is during the last Canadian federal election in May of 2011, calls that went out to registered Liberal and NDP voters. Note, no Conservatives got these calls, or if they did, they certainly haven't come out with them yet. So it only came out to registered Liberal and NDP voters in no fewer, right now, I don't think, than 18 different ridings across the country, which you may think, oh, big deal, there's like 300 some, but we'll get into that a little more later. No fewer than 18 ridings had gotten these calls, issuing them fake changes to their voting stations, saying, this is so-and-so from Elections Canada, and your voting station is here now. And in some cases that we've read on CBC and CTV, people have said that it directed them hours away from where they lived, only to find out that this isn't your polling station and you have to go home now, likely not making it back in enough time to actually register a vote because, you know, people work. So it was these automated calls that went out to Liberal and NDP voters telling them that their polling stations had changed. The obvious connection here is that, well, no conservative voters are saying they got these robocalls, so what's going on? The plot thickens. Court documents have been released to courts in Edmonton that show a link between the National Conservative Campaign and this call center, which is called Rack 9, this call center that issued these phone calls. There were 31 calls placed between, I've got his name here, Marty Burke's Conservative Campaign headquarters in Guelph, Ontario. 31 calls placed from his campaign headquarters to Rack 9 between the months of March and May. 31 phone calls. Why would this guy, or anyone on his campaign staff, or anyone in the Conservative campaign staff, need to call this outbound call center 31 times between May and March leading up to an election? Bear in mind, Rack 9 is not listed on Marty Burke's campaign expenses list. So, as far as the record goes, Marty Burke did not employ Rack 9 on his campaign. So why did he call them 31 times between March and May leading up to a federal election? And then it just so happens that this call center was the base for all of these automated phone calls to go out to Liberal and NDP voters, telling them to either change who they're going to vote for or change their voting station. That, to me, is too much to call it a coincidence. As a matter of fact, I would say there's virtually no way that that was a coincidence. For the record, some voting stations did legitimately change for the election, but it was less than 1%. There was 127 voting stations of more than 15,000 across the country that actually changed prior to the election. So less than 1%, to me, doesn't justify those hundreds of thousands of phone calls, alleged hundreds of thousands of phone calls, to people in ridings where their voting station didn't change at all, but telling them to go perhaps hours away from where their actual voting station was. There's only one thing to call this. The only thing you can possibly call this is voter suppression. That's exactly what it was. Conservative-funded voter suppression. Let me give you a little bit of backstory as far as my personal experience with last year's election, because it was actually really contentious, and a number of my friends would say that as well. I had heated arguments with a few of them. I didn't vote in the last election. It was the first election ever that I had been registered for that I didn't vote. And I'll tell you why I didn't vote in the last election. I did not consider the 2011 Canadian federal election to be legitimate. Because you had, first of all, you had a liberal leader who was completely incompetent. I'm sorry, there's nothing else that you can call, I believe it was Stéphane Dion, there's nothing else you can call him but completely batshit incompetent. On the other side, you have Stephen Harper. Fuck Stephen Harper, but for a more legitimate reason. Harper's government was found to be in contempt of Parliament, legally found to be in contempt of Parliament. And I don't know what else needs to be said. They were found to be in contempt of Parliament, and the thing that completely blew my mind was that they allowed him to run again. That's okay, you broke Canadian law, but we'll let you run again. Don't worry about it. He should never have been allowed to run in that election. And that is the point that I finally said, you know what? I have had enough of Canada's political bullshit, and that is why I did not vote in the last election. And I will defend it to the death. And now, something like this Robo-Calls stuff, coming up and completely destroying the credibility of the election results in these ridings. 18 ridings might not seem like a whole lot, but I want you to consider that Stephen Harper only has an 11-seat majority. He has 166 seats. You need 155 for a majority. I'm not saying that this Robo-Calls thing affected all 18 of those ridings, where if it didn't happen, the Conservatives wouldn't have won and he wouldn't have got his majority. But what I am saying is that if that is the case, then Harper's majority government is illegitimate. That's a big if, and I understand that. And that's why I'm not saying, your majority is illegitimate. I'm saying the potential, however small, is there that his majority is illegitimate. Take a look to Rick Mercer did an excellent rant on this February 28th, talking about this Robo-Calls scandal and talking about voter suppression. Like, not only did I not vote in the last election, I also encouraged people not to vote if they were like me and they had become sick and tired of Canada's political bullshit. I encouraged them not to vote. However, I wasn't going to call them up and say, you know, you better not vote or this is going to happen, or go to their houses and play some medieval kind of one-man Red Rover to physically stop them from voting. To me, that's a choice. I exercised my choice as a free citizen not to vote. I can only suggest, if you're as pissed off about this as I am, don't vote. That was simply all that I was saying back in the election. And I can't exactly say that I swayed anyone with what I thought, but I still said it and I still stand by it. But if this Robo-Calls scandal is legit, if it's 100% legit, and yes, it's found, I know Elections Canada is now running a probe into it, if this is found that, yes, the Conservative Party was directly responsible for these robocalls, that it influenced people's votes, may have even been deciding in a few ridings. I think it's the riding of Nipissing in Ontario was only won by 18 votes, and that's one of the ridings that has reported people saying that they've gotten these robocalls. It was 18 votes. That could they could very easily have swayed 18 people. That wouldn't be too tough. If it's found, and that would have completely determined the result of that riding, if it is found that, yes, the Conservatives did this, and yes, it affected results or anything like that, if this is found to be legit, if you, as a Canadian, are not calling for Stephen Harper's head on a pike, you're not doing your job as a citizen. And I'll put that out there. Harper would need to resign over this if it's found that this is what's going on. That's pretty much all I really have to say about it. It's another one in a long line of these political, I don't even want to call it a political game, because it's so much more than that. There's underhanded political tactics, and there's literal voter suppression. And this was the latter. And you can't have free elections in a situation where you're doing things to suppress voters. That's it. That's all I really have to say about it. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Justin, of course, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. See ya.